Welcome to URI Wellness, where we explore all things health and self-care. Whether you're seeking mental clarity, physical fitness, or insight from students like you, we've got you covered. Welcome back to the URI Wellness podcast. I am Olivia, and today we are continuing our two-part mini-series on grief. So I'm here with Allison Hall, a clinical counselor here at the University of Rhode Island at Health Services. And in this episode, we are going to look at what it's like to live with grief and how to support others in grief. Last episode, we talked about grief just as a whole and how to better understand it. So if you didn't listen to that, go back and listen to that one. So what does grief look like in real life versus like what it might look like in theory? Especially maybe talking about like the physical symptomology of grief and how it might manifest, because I think some people might understand grief as like only an emotion.
So I think that we oftentimes fail to remember that we're one integrated body and that our feelings, emotional feelings and our physical feelings are not happening in silos. And so if we think about how we might feel when we're feeling profound sadness or anxiety, those oftentimes present cognitively, right, in our thoughts, but also physically. From a physical standpoint, it might be really hard to sleep, fall asleep, stay asleep. We might dread waking up because when we wake up, we're back to the reality of the loss that we experienced. And sleep is part of what fuels our brains and our bodies. And so without appropriate sleep, we might have a harder time functioning, and that might layer on top of the emotional grief that we're experiencing. So I think a lot about sleep because it's so important. The other thing that fuels our bodies is nutrition. And so I might really lose my appetite, or I might try to self-soothe through eating comfort foods. And if I'm losing my appetite and having a hard time eating, I'm not fueling myself, which also can lead to difficulty with cognitive abilities and concentration and energy levels. So, I think for me, that's kind of a good example of how we integrate all of those things together. Abdominal distress, sometimes we call our gut our second brain, right? So abdominal distress is really prevalent when we're struggling emotionally. So again, if I am having a hard time eating, and we might have some limits to what we can access for food here at URI, it might lead to not getting enough nutrition. So I always really encourage people to think about how you might make the foods that are available to you work to the best of their ability. Meaning, if I don't have a strong appetite, maybe I'm going to try to go for things like shakes or soups or things that feel soothing but are going to give me nourishment at the same time. And so the sleep, the nutrition, and then physically speaking, think about the things that can happen to us when we're experiencing extreme emotion, difficulty with breathing, difficulty feeling calm, holding our bodies very rigidly, or our muscles in a tense way can impact us. Does that help kind of give some examples?
Yeah.
Okay. And then from an emotional standpoint of how things might look, again, because we know there's not one right or wrong way or one normal or abnormal way, but it might look like, feeling sad, having a lot of tearfulness, even if you're not used to tearfulness, or feeling like you should be crying and you're feeling emotional numbness or shock that prevents that from happening. Sometimes people will say, I wish I could cry because I want some way to get this out and I can't seem to do it. So, really thinking about how that physical expression of the emotion combines.
Thank you. That was really helpful.
Sure.
And just to reiterate what you said right now, but also in the previous episode, that there's no correct way to grieve. You might experience some of these, none of these, and all of it's valid. But I think it is just important to name some of the ways that grief can manifest. Because if someone hasn't gone through grief in a big way before, they might not connect,
right?
What they're going through with it being grieving, especially the physiological parts of it.
For some young adults in the college age range, this might be the first loss that they've had. And so, as you mentioned, it might feel really confusing what's happening or new and different. And there might be a lot of worry, about how they're going through it.
Kind of continuing with that subject a little bit, guilt can be a big part of grieving as well. People can experience guilt while they grieve, while experiencing like positive emotions. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit more and like why that's the case?
Yeah, so I think what you're speaking to is guilt about moving on when there has been a loss. And I think that goes along with this idea that we should be. I don't like the word should. It's like one of my least favorite words, right? Because it's kind of suggesting that there's a certain way that we should be doing things or we're not doing it well enough. So I think for people who maybe they go out and they're having a good time or they're excited to go out, they think, well, I really should be staying at home and feeling sad. But in reality, we don't want to get stuck in that grief. So if you have the interest in going and doing something, then allowing yourself to find some joy when you're feeling sad a lot can be really important. And forgiving yourself for feeling happiness, because you're not really doing anything wrong. For some people, it can be helpful to kind of take a step back and think about the person that they lost, because most of the time when the question is asked, how do you think your fill in the blank would feel about you missing this big event because they died? Do you think they'd want you to go and have fun, or do you think they'd want you to stay in your room and cry? Most of the time, the answer is they'd want me to go enjoy my life. They'd be excited for me. They'd want to hear about this. And so I think that reframe can be very helpful. But when you mention the word guilt, the other thing that comes up that I think would be helpful to comment on is people struggle with guilt if they have survived and someone else passed. I think that can happen a lot, especially with sibling loss. Or they might feel guilty because they feel like they somehow should have prevented or somehow should have spent more time with the person. So there can be a lot of guilt. If we look back at those stages of grief that we talked about last episode, that guilt piece can sometimes be like part of the magical thinking of, I wish I could go back and have made a different outcome or push them to go to the doctor sooner or known that they were going to pass and spent more time with them, which we can't do.
Yeah, I think that is very common, at least that I've seen with some of my friends who have experienced grief of like, oh, I should have known or I should have done this, which is, yeah, sad. And we'll talk about that more about like how to support friends with grief. But how can someone reframe this into understanding that both grief and positive feelings can exist at the same time? I think you mentioned like one really great aspect of what would this person that I lost want me to do? Do you have any other practical ways that this can happen?
So I think that the combining the two or understanding that the positive and the challenge can happen at the same time, I think just as you said and as we've talked about, right, allowing ourselves to feel how we feel in the present moment and not judging ourselves for that, thinking about the person that we lost and what they might want us to be doing. And also remembering that this external thing that happened is not going to dictate your life. It doesn't have to dictate your life. So if you're sad and you feel like being in your dorm room and watching a movie alone is what you need to do, that's what you're going to do. If you don't feel sad at the moment and your friends are going out and you get invited to go out or you have an important club meeting that you want to go to, then that's what you're going to do. So really giving yourself the permission to have your feelings and live your life. Memorializing and meaning making, I think that's hugely important because it allows us to invite the person that we lost or the lifestyle that we lost back in when we want it back in, when we need it back in, when it makes the event feel more whole or more special for us. I talk to students about graduation a lot, especially if they've lost a parent or a grandparent who is really involved or an aunt or uncle who is really involved in their life, who's not going to watch them walk across the stage. And so different, very concrete ways that I've talked with people about managing this might look like carving out some quiet time in the morning of graduation and writing a letter to the person you lost, channeling them, talking with them, thinking about what you want to share with them. What would you tell them if they were there that day? Maybe you're going to carry the letter across the stage with you. Similarly, I have people sometimes want to carry a picture of the person they lost somehow with them or put it on their cap or incorporate them that way. Maybe they're going to play their favorite song in their AirPods before they walk across the stage. pulling something that was special about that person into your life, into that moment with you, allows you to connect with them. People have all different beliefs too. Sometimes people have the belief that their loved one is with them and is there watching them, and that can feel really comforting. I think about holidays a lot too. We talk a lot about holidays. Maybe it's the first Father's Day since your father passed, and what's that going to feel like? How is that going to work with the whole family? Because you're not just navigating your own feelings. Maybe you're with everybody and you're navigating everyone's feelings. Do you make your dad's favorite breakfast? Do you spend a few hours that day doing something you guys used to do together? Do you go sit if they have a graveside? Like, how do you want to connect with them? It can feel, I think, much more connected, special if you can invite them in.
Yeah, that's a lot of great information of like how you can include someone into your special moments, and also like the importance of doing that too.
Yeah.
And then when going through grief, why is therapy a helpful resource?
Yeah. So I think therapy, obviously I think therapy is great. It's what I do for a living. I think it can be really helpful in a lot of situations. I think with grief specifically, sometimes it can be the safe space to talk about things that you're not comfortable sharing with everybody else. It might be a place where you can talk about the person you lost in a really open way. It might be a place where you can talk about your confusion about your parents' divorce or what your life is going to look like next and what your worries are in a private space without feeling judged and looking for objective feedback. Sometimes people are worried that their grieving process is abnormal and they need some reassurance from a mental health provider that things are okay, or when things maybe feel not okay, how we support through that. And the other thing to think about is a lot of times with grief work, therapy is scheduled a week in advance usually, and for some people it's like the same time every week. And we might not want to talk about it the same time every week. I might be feeling great and not want to go be reminded and start feeling sad again because I want to hold on to this feeling of being great. Or I really might need to schedule an extra appointment this week because I'm really feeling it this week. So I think sometimes scheduling as you need it with grief work can be more helpful.
Mm-hmm. And then what are some of the resources that are URI specific that students can utilize?
Yeah, so we have some great resources on campus. I think URI has access to mental health care in a really unique way because you can access it in different places. The URI Counseling Center, which is right over in Roosevelt Hall, has individual therapy, and they offer group therapy as well, and they do have a grief group. As you mentioned, when people first have a loss, it's not always the time that they are ready to talk in maybe a group setting or even an individual setting. But that's something that can be available over time as you need it. So the Counseling Center at URI, as I mentioned, I am a clinical counselor at Health Services, and students can actually self-appoint to meet with me, or they can get referred in, or they can call in. And then we have the Psychological Consultation Center, which is right on campus as well. And that's over in Chaffee, and that is a training site for the graduate program of psychology. So they have some great interns there working. And so we have group, individual, and then of course some people might not want services right here and might access something online, an online or a virtual platform that feels good for them.
All right. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
We're really lucky to have a lot of great resources here at URI.
Agree.
And then in terms of not someone who's experiencing grief themselves, but someone who may be friends with someone who is going through grief or a loss, what is the best way to support a friend going through grief?
Yeah, so I think one of the things I find happens is people don't know what to say and they don't want to upset anyone. So oftentimes they just say nothing. And that's where I think we need to figure out a way that we can communicate our availability to our friends, because oftentimes if you say nothing, the message you're sending is, it's not comfortable for me, so don't talk about it. And that can be interpreted in a lot of different ways by the person who's lost somebody. So my best recommendation, and again, everybody's different, but my best recommendation is some version of, I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm so sorry about fill in the blank. I don't know if you want to talk about it or it's easier for you to not talk about it, but I just want you to know I'm here for you if you want to talk. I think that can offer the opportunity for the person to come to you if they want to talk about it, but not feel like they have to give you a lot of information. The biggest difficulties I see people struggle with is when folks are saying to them, you should really, or if I were you, I would. I think those kind of pigeonhole folks into feeling like they're supposed to be doing more than they're doing, and we don't want to add anything else onto their plate. And the reality is that sentence, if I were you, or if it were me, we don't know how we would act if it was us. And so keeping those opinions to ourselves, I think, is helpful. I think just letting somebody know you care about them and you love them and you're there to talk about it if they are ready and when they're ready, and that you're not there to like gather information and be a detective, right? You're there just to listen.
Yeah, and support them in whatever way that they need.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Before we wrap up, a quick reminder that all information shared in today's podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. Thank you for listening to another episode of Roadie Wellness. If you like what you heard today, tune in every Tuesday on all podcast platforms for more. If you want to stay up to date on events and healthcare tips, please follow us at URI Health Promotions on Instagram. And if you have any ideas for future podcast episodes or more social media content that you'd like to see, please feel free to DM us or email us. Until next time, take care and stay healthy.